All right, so we're talking about the Democrat Party versus the Whig Party. The Democrat Party versus the Whig Party. And the Whig Party they are the descendants of the National Republicans who were founded by Madison, Monroe, Quincy Adams. Okay, and the Democrats are, of course, the opposition party to that, founded by Jackson. So neither of these two parties traces itself back to the Federalists. The Federalist tradition was completely obliterated, essentially. So at John Adams' party, nobody traces their lineage back to that. Okay, they both see themselves as descendants of the Republican tradition of Jefferson, but you have kind of the Madison's vision for that being the National Republicans, and then Jackson's vision of that being the Democrat Party. So the Democrat Party sees itself as the champion of the common white guy, basically. So one way to think about this is with slavery. They tend to support the expansion and promotion of slavery, not in the sense that the federal government actually promotes it, but in the sense that the federal government shouldn't be involved in it at all, and the individual white guy should be able to decide whether he wants to have slaves or not, right? So there's that. They also see themselves very much as the defenders of the old economy, so the agricultural economy. They resist capitalistic development. They resist industrialization, right? They resist the federal government being involved at all, intervening at all to promote a capitalistic economy, promote trade, that sort of thing. And in this way, they see themselves as the champion of the small farmer, okay, but also the champion, say, of the small-time manufacturer, the artisan, some of whom are getting put out of business by mass production centers, what are called factories later on. So they want manufacturing to be kind of small scale, local, in the artisan tradition, okay? And so there's kind of an art to it. There's a craft to it, right? That's the artisan. And those guys, they're not producing stuff for a huge population, but for a small local population. And so those guys tend to see themselves as aligned more to the Democrat Party. So that older, less capitalistic, on a wider scale economy, the Democrats tend to favor. They also want to limit immigration. They want to make it harder for immigrants to become American citizens. All right. And so those are kind of the main points there for the Democrat Party, and they would say they're favoring the small guy against the moneyed interests, that is the bankers and the merchants, who they see as being corrupt, and they want to limit the amount of influence that those guys can have on the economy and on the government. So for that reason, they also oppose, this is one of the big elements of the Democrat Party, they oppose a national central bank because they say it gives too much influence to the bankers and the merchants. So if we remember back to the early days of the Republic, Alexander Hamilton, right, he had supported the national bank because he said it would provide stable currency, which would promote the economy and trade, and it would help creditors have stability, right? Because they would give out loans and then they would get paid back for those loans on interest. If the currency stays stable, that helps the creditor make money off of it, so we can give out more loans in the future. Anyway, stabilizing the currency, which then provides stability to the economy in the long run. They also wanted the national bank to be the place where, like, the federal government could go to take out loans, right? So the national bank was constituted in the early republic. The charter expired. It was renewed, so there was a second national bank, okay? And again, this is a private institution, meaning that private wealthy individuals put money into it, and that money is backed up by gold, or it's backed up by some real valuable asset, land, or manufacturing product, or whatever it is. Usually it's gold, right? So, and the national bank is supposed to issue that banknotes, which it gives to local banks to stabilize the currency throughout the United States. Okay, so all of that is the first national bank and then the second national bank, right? And Jackson refuses to recharter the bank under his presidency. So the bank charter expires and the second national bank goes away and there's no national bank. And Martin Van Buren will continue to oppose creating a national bank in his presidency because he says that allows the moneyed interests, the bankers and the merchants, to have too much influence on the economy. Okay. rather than, say, letting local markets determine what the value of a product is, right? Which could help the small farmer guy sell what he wants at a higher price or whatever it is, right? Their point is like, you don't want this thing to be centrally controlled, okay? And you don't want there to be some kind of alliance between the bankers and the merchants and the government. So the Whigs are basically really kind of the opposite of a lot of these things. The main thing for the Whigs, right, and they're in that tradition of Madison, Monroe, Quincy Adams. So their main thing is that they support the government investing in the economy, building infrastructure in particular, building roads and dams and canals, or hiring, contracting out companies to build these things, so that the trade between the states can go forward better, right? And so this will allow products to be shipped from state to state more easily. It will allow some manufacturers who are successful to produce more and more goods, and then use the shipping, the better roads and the better railroads to get those large amounts of product to larger population centers or different population centers, opens up new markets. So they want to develop the capitalistic economy. That's their main thing there for the Whigs, right? And so they promote a stronger federal government, say, than the Democrats do, because they want that federal government to be investing in promoting this capitalistic industrial development. They also want there to be a central bank so that there can be stable currency, and there can be a place where the government can go to get loans when it needs to, invest in the economy and the infrastructure, for instance, right? All right. Now, the problem with the Whig Party is that they're based in a kind of a group of different factions here. So you have people who are who are opposed to slavery, but maybe not abolitionists. They kind of favor a more gradualistic approach to eliminating it or containing it. You have the abolitionists who want to end slavery immediately, of course, see themselves more in line with, they're going to work with the Whig Party initially. And then you have Southerners who are uncomfortable with Jackson and who are uncomfortable with his desire to sort of empower the common white guy. So these would be the old sort of gentlemanly Virginia people, like the big rich planters, right? Sort of the the people who are similar to the demographic of the people like George Washington or something, right? Like the old school people. All right. Now, the problem is that they these factions don't always get along within the Whig Party. So the problem for them is going to be unifying these factions, okay? Because particularly on the issue of slavery, there's going to be disagreement among them, right? There's going to be primarily the Whigs tend to be more slavery is evil. Maybe we should end the slave trade, right? But the big question is should we fight it and try to end it now? And of course, that's the thing that's going to divide these groups from each other within the Whig Party, okay? If we think about kind of in intellectual sense, the Whig Party, right, really wants to promote virtue among the citizenry. It sees virtue as the central thing that you have to promote in order to preserve liberty and the republic. So you can't just let everybody do whatever they want, because they're going to abuse each other. There's going to be lawlessness. They're going to abuse vulnerable groups, like Black people or Native Americans are really going to suffer a lot if we just don't have, but also poor people or whatever. So in other words, there has to be the development of virtue in order to preserve liberty for everybody. And so you can't just do whatever you want. The common white guy can't just do whatever he wants, or the common person or anybody can't just do whatever they want according to the Whigs. Whereas the Democrats see sort of individual choice as the thing that's what liberty means for them. You can do whatever you want. For the Whigs, no, there's a kind of moral code that you need to try to live up to or identify. And education, public education, for instance, these kind of things are going to promote that, okay? So that's kind of how and if you think back to James Madison, right, then that is the kind of the model that he had with his warnings about faction, right? You have human nature tends to violent faction, so you need to have a lot of factions competing with each other so that one doesn't dominate the others, right? So that's kind of the intellectual foundations of that. And this all kind of comes together in the election of 1840, where you have the Martin Van Buren facing off against William Henry Harrison. Harrison wins, but in a big way. But Harrison gets sick at his inaugural speech and then dies, within like a month, poor guy. And then his vice president comes in, John Tyler, and John Tyler is just not really ready to unify the different components of the Whig Party. And so none of their goals come together. They don't recharter the bank. They aren't able to promote the economy in the way they want, the capitalistic economy. They don't really get anything done. And then they're going to kind of fall out of power. They're just going to be ineffective, essentially, the Whigs are. All right?